Man, rest in peace to these cursed spirits in advance. Gojo is about to absolutely go off on them. And considering the fact that this is pretty much the very first time we've seen Gojo visibly pissed in this entire series, aside from the past arc, things are not looking good for the cursed spirits at all. Or will they manage to hold off Gojo for 20 minutes? That remains to be seen. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and what an interesting episode of JJK this week. Since this is pretty much a setup episode, I was definitely expecting them to cut corners, which they definitely did during the Grasshopper Curse fight. Also were some really impressive shots sprinkled in throughout this episode that almost took me by surprise. And while the pacing of this episode was great for the most part, I definitely felt like they could have streamlined the Grasshopper Curse fight, especially with the explanation about grasshoppers. Like, bruh, that shit did not need to be present in this episode. It works in the manga, but in case of the anime, it straight up could have been cut without losing anything of value. The second info dump about him having a trick was fine, but they easily could have cut the first info dump out. I assume the reason they did this is because they want the bulk of Gojo's fight with the curses to be in the next episode, so they can't really go further than where this episode ended. I know it may feel like nitpicking, but in all honesty, these issues don't really bother me that much, and they probably shouldn't to other people watching as well. It's just those were some things that stood out to me, so I wanted to mention about them in this video. But yeah, aside from that, this was a really solid episode. So now that I'm done being a bitch about inconsequential shit, it's time to go over the contents of this episode and talk about stuff that I loved. Gojo arriving at the underground floor of the station, where all the people got sucked into, was cool as hell, especially considering how he's just straight up floating in the air like a god and walking over people. Imagine being a normal person and you suddenly see a man floating in the air and walking over people. Well, sadly, that certainly won't be the only surprising thing happening to them this night, considering that just in a few minutes, they are about to get brutally murdered by curses that most people can't even see. Like the curses did not bother wasting any time at all and started absolutely brutalizing the people as soon as Hanami closed off the exit and they opened the gates and let in all the people. Before diving further into the plan of the cursed spirits and the underground fight, I first wanna get all the other stuff out of the way. We finally see our boy Itadori, and he's paired with Mei Mei and her little brother Ui Ui. And man, it's literally that meme of people who know versus people who don't. That's all I have to say. Mei Mei uses her crows to find out that there are a lot of transfigured humans inside, so she gives Itadori the option to either go kill the transfigured humans or deal with a stronger cursed spirit. And considering Yuji's experience with transfigured humans, especially Pokemon Junpei, Yuji decides to go after the cursed spirit. And Yuji encounters the grasshopper cursed spirit feasting on a human, with the body presumably being still alive with the twitching fingers, which makes for a quite horrific scene. And one thing I loved about this scene was the fact that it was not censored at all, and a lot of other things that happened in this episode as well, which I feared could be censored considering just how brutal the manga gets, so I'm really happy to see JJK in all its glory uncensored. We also get an explanation as to why a grasshopper curse exists, but the explanation honestly should have been cut in my opinion, and the fight was honestly quite meh. Although the scene where the curse was attacking Yuji and Yuji dodging all his attacks was freaking awesome, especially the camera angles and how it's animated. Easily the highlight of this fight for me. And I did not care for the DBZ style fight with fists at all, although the grasshopper curse being so dumb and gullible was kind of fun to watch. We also see Mahito, and he mentions that he has a job to do, and considering that he wasn't there fighting Gojo, it seems that the curses have a lot planned. And now moving back to Gojo, it turns out that the reason they trapped people underground, Gojo is the strongest when he's fighting alone, so they've already handicapped Gojo a lot. He pretty much can't use red, blue or purple without straight up killing most of the civilians there, and is forced into just using his infinity for defense. which the cursed spirits have a counter for this time, and that is domain amplification, which is pretty similar to simple domain that we saw Mekamaru use in the previous episode, and it can be used to neutralize Gojo's infinity. And as if all that wasn't enough, Gojo is also in a situation where he can't use his domain expansion as well, because the only people that aren't affected by it are the people who are being directly touched by Gojo and Gojo himself. And even if he could manage to only drag cursed spirits into his domain, a domain expanding in a closed off area would squish most people there to death. And honestly, say what you want, but the cursed spirits definitely came in prepared this time and have an actually good plan to deal with Gojo this time around. Also, I love the fact that the curses in Geto discussed their plans at a kid's playground. It's just so unsettling to see, especially with Hanami and Mahito playing with the kids, and the fact that they're not even visible to the people. Imagine you're walking by and you see a grown-ass man who's dressed weirdly talking to himself at a kid's playground. That would be weird as hell. Gojo going off on the civilians was nuts. He literally wasted no time burning people to death, and getting to see Choso's technique was cool as hell. And the episode ends with Gojo removing his blindfold and giving us the coldest shot of this episode, ready to go off on them. And man, I really can't wait for next week. Without spoiling anything, I can only say that it is about to be insane and probably one of the best JJK episodes of all time. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have for this episode. A solid episode considering the fact that it's mostly set up, and even though the animation wasn't as insane as the previous episode, we did get to see some really cool shots that got me pretty hyped for the future. Let me know what you guys thought about this episode, what you liked, what you didn't like, and also comment if you have any questions about this episode. I'd be more than happy to answer them. Please leave a like if you enjoyed, sub for more, and have a nice day.